Well, thank you to the CAPS bargaining team and Cal HR for giving me the opportunity to share my story. To share my story as a senior environmental scientist working for the Department of Toxic Substances Control. I started with the department when it was a program back in 1987. And for the first about 12 years, I worked in various programs, permit program, enforcement, site mitigation, and pollution prevention. In 1999, I was promoted to a senior environmental scientist specialist, working for the California Environmental Protection Agency on loan from the department. I worked on the environmental management systems and sustainability program. I returned to DTSC in 2002, working as a project manager in site mitigation for the Office of Military Facilities and in the site mitigation restoration program. When I returned to the site mid program, something changed, and what changed was that the pay inequities began. I have a BA in Earth Science and MA in Geography from the California State University of Northridge. Senior environmental scientist specialist responsibilities at the Department of Toxics include managing the most complex, controversial, and crucial projects. We also take on special projects. For me, I'm the Brownfields coordinator in the DTSC Berkeley office, and I'll talk about that later. We lead multidisciplinary teams of engineers, scientists, lawyers, public participation specialists. We prioritize schedules, budgets, personality, professional strength, guidance, and direction. It's also the role of a senior environmental scientist specialist to be a leader. I personally train and mentor staff and management. I'm a subject matter expert on many things, including dioxin cleanup and brownfields redevelopment. I make risk management decisions and policy decisions. Of course, those are not made in a vacuum, but I make a decision and bring it to my management and say, hey, this is what I think we should do, and this is why. And I provide institutional knowledge. At DTSC, we have lost a lot of our staff. We have much younger and inexperienced staff, and our senior supervisors are also new to the department, and a lot of that institutional knowledge lies with the senior environmental scientist specialist in the Berkeley office. So my experience, responsibility, and authority as a specialist was, my experience at the California EPA Environmental Management Systems and Sustainability Program in Office of Military Facilities, Site Mitigation Restoration Program, and Brownfields Coordinator. Those 4 areas of work I'm going to talk about right now. Cal EPA, I was involved in the Environmental Management Systems Program and the Sustainability Program. I was promoted to a senior environmental scientist in 1999, and I worked and reported directly for the Assistant Secretary for Sustainability at Cal EPA. That program was a partnership with business and industry to improve environmental performance in hazardous waste, toxic substances, energy, air, and water. We analyze industry and business environmental performance data related to environmental management systems implementation. And one of the main goals is to determine how state government and regulators can work with industry in driving environmental performance and compliance. So during my involvement with that program, I developed and directed projects with Lockheed Martin, the Skunk Works down there in Palmdale, where they make the stealth fighter and B-1 bomber. And I also worked with commercial wineries in Sonoma and Napa counties. I facilitated working groups with government, industry, and non-government organizations. I analyze environmental performance data, for example, waste reduction, reduction of um, uh, hazardous waste that was produced during maintenance and building of aircrafts down at Lockheed Martin. And I co-authored the report to the California legislature on project results. After that program ended, I was asked by the branch chief for the Office of Military Facilities to take on the management of the Hunters Point Shipyard Superfund site. This is a complex, controversial, and crucial project in the city of San Francisco. And my replacement of a senior hazardous substance engineer as project manager at the Hunters Point Shipyard demonstrates that we are interchangeable. It demonstrates that the scientist, the senior scientist, and a senior engineer can do like work and share the responsibilities. Can you see my arrow right here? As far as this complex, controversial, and crucial project, I'm going to show a few things that are going on. This is the air photo taken during World War II. This area right here became a landfill, which had solid waste, chemical waste, and radiological waste. You can see smoke coming up here. This became the metal debris reef that had not just metal contamination, but radiological contamination. It was removed. I participated in that, and the restoration of a beach right here. These dry docks, ships that came back from the atomic testing in the Pacific, were cleaned. That spread radioactive contamination into the bay, into this landfill, throughout Hunters Point Shipyard. This area was the main industrial area where they had solvent contamination and radiological waste going into the storm sewers. I work closely with the Regional Water Quality Control Board, California Department of Public Health, and California Fish and Wildlife. And I needed to understand and represent and implement their positions to the US Navy and to the US EPA. I facilitated communication between stakeholders, including the Community Restoration Advisory Board. I worked with the city of San Francisco to establish reuse plans and facilitate interim use and property transfer. I mentioned this as a crucial project. The loss and the closure of the Hunters Point Shipyard was a major blow to the economy of San Francisco, and now is a major opportunity for redevelopment. We had a $10 million a year budget that I worked with EPA and US Navy to determine what our priorities are for that budget. Some of my responsibilities at the Hunters Point Shipyard was to evaluate the data, make risk management decisions on the landfills I mentioned, on groundwater with petroleum and solvent contamination. We had PCBs on offshore sediments. The storm drains were removed and tested for radiation. We had tested and applied innovative technologies, including technologies to stabilize offshore sediment with PCBs. We restored the bay shoreline, as I mentioned, the metal debris reef, and we cleared property for reuse. This figure right here shows an overlay of the reuse plan that the city of San Francisco developed, and overlaid with that are risk quadrants that show different levels of risk and where the contamination is, where there may be the greatest inhibitors to redevelopment, where we have to focus our priorities for cleanup, for not just protecting the public health, but also to support redevelopment. I also work on after leaving the Hunters Point Shipyard site, I was assigned to the Georgia Pacific Mill site. I was asked by the branch chief at the Berkeley office to take on this project. And I've been working on this project since 2009 within the site mitigation and restoration program. The goals of the site mitigation and restoration program is to protect public health and environment, but is also to support redevelopment. This photo is a historic Georgia Pacific mill site. And some things I'd like to point out is here, this is the power plant with the smoke coming out. This power plant burned waste wood and other materials, producing dioxin, which then entered a small pond that was here, then pumped over ponds that are over in this area, eventually flowed down to this, what we call Pond 8. So it moved dioxin contamination throughout the waterways of the mill site. Fly ash was also disposed of in various areas and landfills at the mill site. The fly ash also included high levels of dioxin contamination. Here's a cleanup of one of those dioxin sites. Georgia Pacific Mill Site is a large site, it's 450 acres. It closed in 2002, resulting in the loss of over 2,000 jobs. So again, it's a complex and it's a crucial project and controversial. There's soil, groundwater, sediment contamination with metals, dioxin, PCBs, solvents, and petroleums. We have wetlands, ponds, industrial land, landfills, and the ocean environment to address. I manage a multidisciplinary team at DTSC of geologists, toxicologists, environmental planners, public participation specialists, engineers, and attorneys. And as a project manager, I'm the one who's setting the priorities, making sure that they have the work assignments that are necessary, receiving that work back, ensuring that it meets our department goals and expectations, and communicating those to Georgia Pacific. Similarly to the Fort Bragg, the Hunters Point Shipyard, I'm a single point of contact for all other state agencies, including the Fish and Wildlife, the water boards, Division of Safety of Dams. I work with the Coastal Commission and the Coastal Conservancy. We're addressing issues like climate change, the dioxin risk, cleanup alternatives, and matching those cleanup alternatives and decisions with redevelopment. I partner with the city of Fort Bragg, working directly with the city manager and the development director. And I work directly with the Sherwood Valley Tribe of Pomo Indians. Hundreds of acres have been cleaned up or cleared for redevelopment now at the Georgia Pacific Mill site. One of the examples is the Noyo Headlands Park Coastal Trail. If you ever have an opportunity to get to the Mendocino coast, I would suggest you visit it. It changed the status and the soul of Fort Bragg, and that's what I hear from people from the town. It changed the soul of Fort Bragg. The coastline was inaccessible for over 100 years. They now have up to 5,000 visitors per day. I mentioned the special projects. The Brownfields Coordinator for the Berkeley office. Now, Brownfields is a property that, because of contamination or perceived contamination, is not viable for redevelopment or its highest intended use. So I'm responsible for the success of the voluntary cleanup program in the Berkeley office. I'm the first point of contact for parties interested in the voluntary program. I provide guidance and initial scoping of projects. I receive and process the applications for entry into our voluntary cleanup program. I determine the eligibility with the program, and I work with the Regional Water Quality Control Board to figure out who will be the lead oversight agency. Would it be a water board site or a DTSC site? I'm responsible for training and mentoring project managers and supervisors, and that includes working with the project manager in the scoping meetings with the consultants and developers, walking through the negotiation process, reviewing documents that they are preparing, and making sure that identifying any issues and resolving problems. This is an example of a recent voluntary project that came into the Berkeley office. And this is about what I received and had a call and email from the consultant wanting to talk about bringing this project to the DTSC office. The applicant is basically the Oakland A's. The Oakland Coliseum, as you may know, the Raiders have left. The Oakland A's are planning to build a new stadium, and the Golden State Warriors have moved across the bay to San Francisco. The Oakland A's are interested in redeveloping the property, and I was given this figure here, and there's a few things I see. One is that we have lead contamination here at about 1,000 milligrams per kilogram. That's at a hazardous waste level, so this is a very significant contaminated area. There's also lead down in this area here. The top of the screen, we have solvents coming in from likely the industrial area across the railroad tracks. The Arroyo Creek right here is contaminated with PCBs. And so with this data and the conversation I had with the consultant, I was able to identify data gaps and scope the project to pretty much completion, what we would have to do, which program would be best for the Oakland A's, and that would be a program that provides them as a prospective purchaser immunities to being identified as a responsible party. So if someone buys property in California and has not completed the all appropriate inquiries that protects them from liabilities, they become a responsible party and are fully responsible for the cleanup of the contamination. By entering into this program, they are agreeing to do the investigation and doing the cleanup, but they will not be identified as a responsible party, and that protects them from various liabilities. So during my 20 years as a senior environmental scientist specialist, my pay relationship has changed, but not my responsibilities. I've reported directly to branch chiefs, to deputy directors, and to the Assistant Secretary of Cal EPA. I manage high-profile and technically challenging projects. I manage diverse teams of scientists, engineers, toxicologists, planners, lawyers, and public participation specialists. I mentor and train DTSC management and staff, and I represent DTSC on multi-agency and multi-government teams. The senior environmental scientists, specialists, and supervisors, the level of responsibility is comparable. The competency requirements is equal. The leadership needs is comparable. And representing DTSC as a science specialist or or supervisor is also comparable. The pay, however, is vastly different, and it was not like that in the past and during my tenure as a senior environmental scientist. Thank you for the opportunity to presenting my story as a senior environmental scientist at the Department of Toxics.